It is time to officially shut the third star down for Philadelphia. We'll break it down right here on Locked On 76ers.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On 76ers. We're your host, Keith Pompey, 76ers beat writer. I'm Kayla Santiago, sideline reporter for the Delaware Blue Coats, the 76ers NBA G League affiliate. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe in addition to wherever you listen to your podcast. And you can now check us out on our free daily newsletter on LockedOnDaily.com. So Tyrese Maxey still wants to play and still wants to come back. Keith, now is not the time.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's not the time. I mean, when we think about it, and here's the thing. So a week ago, people were saying that, Tyrese wants to play. He wants to, he's a gamer. He wants to be out there with his guys. But he's been practicing. He's been doing a lot of things with the team, but he hasn't been back, right? And they keep saying they want him to be 100%. I'm of the belief he's not coming back at all. And it doesn't make sense for him to come back at all. Because when we look at this, a couple nights ago when they played the New Orleans Pelicans and they lost to them, it was like Quentin Grimes got a rest night. They went out there and got Marcus Bagley, a guy who's, okay, but he wasn't a guy that was going to help them win games. So when you look at the 76ers right now, if you have Quentin Grimes, you have Tyrese Maxey, you have Gershon Yabusele, right? The way that these teams are also resting players, they'll steal a couple wins, especially during this easy set. So to me, if you bring Tyrese back, you're basically going to hurt your chances to tank, right? So now is not the time. And also, I know he's 24 years old. I know that, he's young, but he's banged up right now. We're talking about his hand. We're talking about his back. I know that he's relentless. He doesn't want to do this. He doesn't that. Bruh, just shut it down. And let's see, New York, the game that some people might say, come back against New York, the Knicks. You probably won't beat them, but you'll be able to play in the Garden. Well, people haven't seen the Knicks lately. They're a 500 team over their last 8 games. So, it's one of those things where just shut them down, just like you did Joel. But the one thing I will say, the 76ers probably won't announce that they're going to shut them down. The reason being is they don't want to get fined by the league for tanking. Right. So it's always going to be one of those things where he's working towards to come back. He's doing this, but he's just not ready just yet. You know what I mean? Because for fear of getting fined for tanking, they probably won't do that.
Now, I'm no medical professional either, but I feel when you look at Joel Embiid's injury and Paul George's injury, it's situations where if they play and there's no need for them to play because they need to be shut down at this point, there's no reason Paul George should be getting injections in his finger as a player on a team that is going to be in the lottery. And Joel Embiid shouldn't be aggravating that knee that he clearly shouldn't have been probably playing on this year. The league might look at it as Tyrese Maxey has these injuries that he could play through and come back from. The 76ers, to me, have to look at it being like, what's the point? You don't want to get him further injured. You don't want him to get hurt. And you don't want him to help you win because that's what's going to happen. I mean, Keith, he's not going to play against the Wizards, but they're going to beat the Heat with Tyrese Maxey. They'd beat the Raptors with Tyrese Maxey. The Knicks would be an interesting game, but they beat the Heat again. They beat the Wizards later on, possibly the Hawks and the Bulls later to wrap up their season. That's too many wins to count, people, if I'm the Philadelphia 76ers. That will take you out of lottery contention, and it's something the 76ers cannot afford. And that's an interesting point because I was going to ask you, too, is the NBA going to look at this and maybe throw some fines? But I guess if the 76ers don't say they're going to shut him down and say that he's working, and if he doesn't come back, they really can't put that fine towards his name, I guess.
Well, I mean, you really can't. I mean, you can't. But if we're going to be real, Joel's injury, I think Joel, the funny part that they said about Joel's injury was if he practices, is he does a lot of things like he's going to get over the hump. And the one thing that's alarming about the Joel injury is they said we're going to see doctors and we're going to come back with a procedure. It's been close to a month. We haven't heard anything about Joel, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's kind of like Joel just wanted to shut down. He didn't feel like playing no more. The whole thing about Paul George is like, yes, he did have that procedure that's going to sideline him for 6 weeks. But Paul George was prepared to play through it and then possibly have something in the offseason. So to me, like when we talk about all these injuries and everything like that being like harmful to him, I don't think they were. I think that once they realized the team wasn't any good, they decided not to do it. So when you look at Maxey, it's kind of sort of the same thing, like his back. Now, the one thing about a back injury is if you have a messed up back, there's no way of saying it's not messed up, right? You're like, oh, my back, I got whiplash, the whole nine. His hand, we do know that he had problems with his hands. So they're saying like they just want him to be, healthy. But yeah, you're right. It's like we talked about it and I stated it as well. You can't afford to bring him back right yet because as the funny part, this team is competitive, but late in games, there's always a stretch where the other team just puts them away, puts them asleep.
Puts it out of reach. Yeah.
And Maxey, going up against these teams with these backups, they might mess around and do what they did to or try to do what they did to the Houston Rockets, like may try to steal one. So they don't want to do that.
Especially if you have Quentin Grimes in that conversation too, and him and Tyrese Maxey can play off each other. Now, I think the difference too is that Tyrese Maxey actually wants to come back and play, unlike maybe I don't know if he's
100%. I think he's saying that, but you know what I mean. We'll
like,
see.
does he really want to come back on a team that just has a lot of guys that are G Leaguers that he's never really even played with? Like, he's played in some crazy lineups this season, but this would absolutely be the craziest lineup going forward that he would have to play with.
Like, all I'm saying is, I don't know. Like, we got to make sure that there's not an understanding already in place. You know what I mean? Like for instance, what's the initiative for Tyrese Maxey to come back? Like, so he's already missed 52 games, right? So if he plays starting tonight, Wednesday, if he plays the remaining 10 games, that's 62 games. He's still 3 games away from being able to get like all NBA, all these other things. So he's still, so when you factor that in, there's really no initiative personally for him to do it, and basically, so again, I know like what they're saying that he wants to play, but something has to tell me that when you have so many guys out, like the last couple games, they had 10 guys out. And, they're out there practicing or going through treatment or doing like pregame workouts and stuff like that. So when you have all that, it's kind of like, yeah, he's saying one thing. They're saying he's saying one thing, but I'm pretty sure it's like he knows that it might be best to just shut this down and do it. No one will come out and say it.
No.
But it just, you know what I mean? It just a little different. But see, what they want to do is, now here's another thing. It also makes sense to say that he wants to come back because guess what? It takes the pressure off of him with the fans because the fans are like, bruh, you're making $200 and something million.
Right. Where are you at?
We want to see you play. We want to see you play. My kid, I bought this ticket to see you play against the Raptors. What's going on? You need to get out there and play. So, and again, I'm not saying that he doesn't or he does. I'm just saying that, like, it just seems like right now convenient for all these guys to just sit back, relax, and can't wait to October the 14th so they can all fly wherever they need to go and enjoy vacation.
Not even just convenient for the guys on the team that could possibly do that. Also convenient for the 76ers as a team, because as we've alluded to already, if you bring these guys back, the 76ers are going to win games you don't want them to win, and that they can't afford to win in these NBA reverse standings. So no go on Tyrese Maxey coming back. Listen, to the fans that want to see him, you could see him next year. Buy the tickets maybe when they're a little bit more competitive at this point, because Tyrese Maxey will help them win games, which is exactly what you don't want with the Philadelphia 76ers. But we're going to continue talking about this team. And before we heard he's a liar, he doesn't tell the truth, do not trust him. We heard that before from James Harden. We're hearing it again from other former players in the Philadelphia 76ers. So we will break it all down when we come back right here on Locked On 76ers. There's nothing like watching basketball live. The energy of the crowd, the sound, the sneakers on the hardwood, and maybe even a celebrity sitting courtside. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. Easy ticket shopping. I just checked the Game Time app, and there are amazing deals and some huge matchups coming up. Super deals, Game Time Picks, even highlights super deals, giving you the best bang for your buck. Peace of mind with seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee you can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Locked On NBA, LOCKEDON NBA. That is NBA. Once again, the terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? It is the game time. So this has been news that has been known now, but Marcus Morris also came out talking about how he does not trust Daryl Morey. He says he just doesn't trust him. He thinks he's too far ahead of the way basketball needs to be played. Keith, you also kind of wrote about this as well. What does this mean about Daryl Morey? What does this mean for the 76ers? Because now we're looking at two players. James Harden, I think people said, okay, well, James is saying that. Some people didn't want him on the team anymore anyway. But you have Marcus Morris coming out and saying that, oh, that makes me a little bit worried to where the direction of this team is headed with him under the helm.
Yeah, it's not just those two either, though. When you think about it, you Patrick Beverley said, when he was traded, he was told that he wasn't going to be traded. The same thing with Chris Paul, and all this stuff is like documented. And another guy, PJ Tucker, he reached out and asked Daryl Morey. He said, hey, are you guys going to trade me? And Daryl was like, nah, we're not going to trade you. Okay, well then PJ Tucker went ahead and rented out an apartment for the season. And then next thing you know, he has his lease and he's living in LA. So, it's one of those things where it's not a good look for the Sixers and Daryl Morey, especially right now that is coming out, because now people are saying, hey, can this guy be trusted, right? Can he be trusted? And then you look at it and people are going to lump other things that he's doing, like, for instance, giving Joel Embiid that money, giving Paul George that money. So the fans are like, just get him out of here. We don't want this, right? But in regards to players, it's a lot of times players will say, I don't trust this guy. I don't want to come here. But if the 76ers they don't have it now, but if the 76ers have a max contract available, someone's going to take the money. Okay. And that's what happened last year, because when we look at it, James Harden and Paul George are former teammates, they're friends, right? PJ Tucker and all them to probably, they had to have these conversations. He's cool with Tobias Harris and all them. But when you say I got $211.5 million and I'm going to give you that year that no one else is going to give you, well, guess what? I'm going. I'm going. I'm going to take that cheddar. And that's what's happening. So, now, again, when you don't have that money, that's when you have the problem, so to speak. But to me, it's not a good look when Chris Paul calls and you said, I'm not going to trade you. PJ Tucker said the same thing. James Harden calls you a liar. Patrick Beverley said you told him the same thing. And now you have Marcus Morris saying that you can't be trusted. So, yeah, it's not a good look. But if you got the cheddar, they will come.
Oh, they will. And when you look at Paul George, too, I mean, he would be dumb not to come at that point, because at the end of the day, you're not in the prime of your career if you're Paul George. You probably figure you could still help out a team. Are you really worth that money at this point of your career? Probably not. Was Tobias Harris worth a max contract? Probably not, but he's having a better season than Paul George did. So who really knows from that standpoint? But at the end of the day, I think when you look at it and you're Paul George, you're just saying, well, why wouldn't I take that? Why wouldn't I take that extra year? This is exactly what I wanted, and Daryl Morey handed it to me. And the Sixers organization is really interesting to me because I go from the top up and I look at Josh Harris too, who also owns the Devils with the Harris Blitzer, in addition to now owning the Washington Commanders. So he's kind of everywhere and anywhere all at once, right? And then you look at Daryl Morey, and he's starting to lose trust of former guys, and everybody's saying that he's a liar, doesn't tell the truth, and all these things. That makes me worry about the organization, Keith, too, because you can blame players, right? Joel Embiid can be blamed for certain things. Paul George can be blamed for certain things. You can blame Nick Nurse too. But if it's bad and if they're losing trust from the top up, it's only going to dwindle down into worse for the rest of your team that's actually playing there and presenting on the court.
Yeah. I mean, that's tough. But the big thing that really stood out to me, not only, he did say that he doesn't trust them, but the one thing that Marcus Morris really said really makes a lot of sense about, you can't bring in 10 new players and expect to win a championship because you need continuity, right?
Right.
And when you look at teams, you look at the Boston Celtics, they had their core players, and then they brought in a couple new players to tweak it. But the core players have been there for years. And what have they done? They've been able to overcome like the ups and the downs. They learned how to play with each other. Because like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, at first they looked like an AAU team where both of them were trying to outshine the other one. Seriously, a couple years ago, right? So now you have Joel, you have Tyrese, and then you just have like hired hands, mercenaries, right? And Paul George, though, but then you have mercenaries. And it just didn't work because they didn't have time to gel because of injuries, because of other things. So, it typically, like, rarely do you see a team make an in-season trade and that person they traded for in season, especially the trade deadline, is able to get you over the hump. And when you bring in a whole new crew, it's tough to expect that. So, I kind of like understand what Marcus came from. And again, I think the timing was just bad. I mean, because think about Daryl, right? Daryl comes back and he talks about the Sixers fans being angry. He talks about AI, not Allen Iverson, but AI, talking about how he relies on that. Now, the thing about it is, if we're going to be honest, just about every team in the league, they go to it for something. Like they want to see what the numbers are like. It's just like analytics. But, but it just seems like everything he said, the timing was bad based on how the team is struggling right now.
And it's so interesting because in this Joel Embiid era, I feel ever since they had the Jimmy Butler, the JJ Redick team, the Tobias Harris, as well with Ben Simmons on that squad. Ever since they've lost Jimmy, I feel they've been trying to get a player like him back, if that makes sense. You try to bring in another guy that you feel that you can compare with Joel Embiid instead of trying to build on what you have. And every year, it's essentially you're just renting a player to come in. Now, if James Harden worked out, it would have been great. If Paul George worked out, it would have been great. But there's no consistency. There's no way to build. And now you're at a point where the player that you've been wanting to build around and bringing new guys in year after year is really, to me, possibly maybe has 2 to 3 years left, if that, of his prime. We don't know how he's going to be coming in the next season. We haven't even heard if he's, for sure going to get any type of surgery right now or the options that they've been throwing out there. There's no consensus and there's no situation where we've seen that. So I do understand what Morris is saying too. You can't just bring max players in and then have all these guys come in and out and expect to have a team that's going to go on to win an NBA championship. And you can say that all stars work on one team and that's going to win. It really doesn't happen. It happened with Golden State, but they even had more than a year to be able to figure that out too. So with that being said, yes, chemistry does matter. Being able to have a team that comes in matters. I don't even think Luka and LeBron are going to go on to win an NBA championship with Luka coming in this year. They might be a team that could do it next year, or maybe they surprise people and they'll be competitive, but I don't even see that working out. And you're talking about one of the best players of all time and a really, really great young player on that team. So I understand where Morris is coming from. We'll see if more players come out talking about this and what happens in this offseason, because there might be some switches here. We don't really know. It's going to be a crazy offseason in terms of, what happens with Joel Embiid and Paul George in terms of the injuries, the decisions they have to make. So I'm waiting for the drama.
For you, though, who are you talking about as far as the surgery? Are you talking about Embiid or are you talking about George?
No, Embiid, the surgery. Yeah.
And see, that's the thing. It's not like, I do think that the Lakers are, and I hate to say it, the Lakers are further ahead than the Sixers.
For sure. Absolutely.
They have they got the pieces, they have the young talents. The problem is, it's kind of like, let's say if you bring Luka in, but Luka's in his prime, Paul George isn't. The problem is you got a guy who you're heavily reliant on, and you can't depend on. That's what it is. That's the problem right now. And the fact that Daryl Morey gave him that extension is kind of like mind-boggling right now, because he didn't have to do it. So when we look at the Sixers, and let's say if the Sixers, when they had Jimmy Butler at that particular time, you knew that it was Joel Embiid's team. Like you say, the Lakers are LeBron's team, but Jimmy was more of like an alpha dog. He would take charge. He would set people up. He would do what he had to do. Whereas Paul George is kind of like the third option.
Stand in the corner, right?
Yeah, stand in the corner. But the first option can't get on the floor. So that's the problem right then and there, and it's like Embiid, it's just tough to depend when you have a guy who's getting older, and as you said, got a couple years left, but you can't depend on him. That's the problem right then and there.
Yeah, if a couple years. I know back in the beginning of the season, he said, I have 8 years left. To me, there's no way. So
yeah, that was a joke.
Yeah, that as soon as I saw that, I was like, this must be sarcasm, because there is no freaking way. So we'll keep talking on the Sixers in just a moment here on the other side and wrap this episode as well as we get ready for the game tonight. All right, so 76ers, we've touched on Daryl Morey, Tyrese Maxey, everything in between. Keith, I want to ask you a little bit about Joel Embiid, because we really don't know what is going on with him at the moment. We don't know if he's going to get a surgery. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, because I don't know how much time he has left. And it's going to be a really interesting offseason. I'm honestly looking at this as a dramatic offseason for the Philadelphia 76ers, because why are they waiting for the surgery? Why are they waiting if that's what he needs? Or is he not going to get the surgery? Because if you wait until after the season, now his recovery time is going to be even longer, which is going to prohibit him from starting early next preseason and next year. I know we don't really know what's going on right now, but I talked about worrying a little bit about Daryl Morey. I think there's also some worry there with how quiet it has been on the side of this injury from Joel Embiid.
Kayla, I hate to say this, and I hope that I'm wrong, but I feel like we were duped. I feel like people were duped. I think, and what I mean by that is, it's like, so, I'm gonna say this. My daughter did tear her ACL, and it's one of those things where, typically they want you to wait a little bit, but you take a time off, let the swelling go down, things like that. But to me, this whole thing was kind of crazy, because when we look at it, the 76ers kept saying, the team, that Joel Embiid was fine, right? That he needed to get in better shape. He needed to do certain things. I think Joel was saying, leaking it out to ESPN and saying, hey, I think I need rest and I need possibly a surgery. Now, all of a sudden, it's been over a month and we haven't heard anything. But Paul George did the same thing that Joel did, went and consulted with doctors, and then all of a sudden he had a surgery. Then we look at we look at Eric Gordon, right? He consulted with doctors and had a surgery. Now, the same thing with Jared McCain. So now, who knows? Maybe Joel is still trying to do stuff. But you remember the Sixers were saying that he didn't necessarily need surgery, right? So, again, we don't know if it's swelling or this and that. But whenever you ask people questions, and I asked Nick Nurse on Sunday, like, what's the update? And he says, oh, we don't have one just yet. So, to me, I hope it doesn't mean that Joel just got fed up and said, you know what, y'all, I'm done. Because let's keep it 100. He didn't tell Nick Nurse or Daryl Morey that he was done. He told the owner. Mm-hmm. They got it from the owner. So it's one of those things where, the last game that Joel Embiid played in, he played poorly, and he was benched in the fourth quarter because of his play, right? So to my thing is, we'll see what it is. Maybe he'll do some type of procedure in the offseason. But you are correct. Like, if you're going to do something on your knee, you might as well get it done now, because then you don't know how long you're going to be out for the recovery time is. So, but to me, like, it just seems like he just didn't want to play. I'm going to be honest. It just seemed like Joel's like, yo, this ain't really going away. I felt, you guys saying I'm okay. My body is telling me something different. And that was it. I
believe it's a really bad look for everybody involved too, because if you're Joel Embiid, if that's how you feel, you're not able to trust your coach. You're going to tell ESPN reporters that you might need to shut it down or possibly get surgery. And that's where we're hearing it from, not from your head coach. In addition to being in a situation where you're just saying, all right, well, this season is not going the way that I thought it would. It's not going the way I wanted to. I'm done. But yet this team, it seems as though next year and in years to come, at least the next 2 to 3, is still wanting to be in this Joel Embiid era and build around you. What does that say about you as this franchise player? And it's crazy, because are we just finally starting to see who Joel Embiid might be? This is what it's going to reveal? Because we saw it in the beginning of the season when Tyrese Maxey had to call him out. Are we seeing it now too? Because at the end of the day, this isn't the player that I think a lot of people thought he was. Things weren't going the way maybe he wanted it to, but they never have been this bad. They never have been this bad, except in the beginning of his career when we didn't really know what he was going to truly be yet. Now we know. Now he's been an MVP. He's come up short in the second round, and now it's the worst it's been. And some characters starting to show a little bit here is what it's looking like. Now, we are going to see what this offseason will do, and it'll be really telling. But when things get bad, sometimes, Keith, that's when you really start to see the true character of some people as well.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Like, and I wrote this back in December, and everybody's like, what are you talking about? I said, they need to shut them down. And the reason why I did that is because, we talk about, the incident he had in the locker room with a reporter. But the thing that really got me was it was a couple games where he got nicked up and banged up and he didn't come back, right? Yeah. And in the past, he would try to come back or whatever. But the one thing was when he went after the referee, and that you saw the rage and the frustration. At that particular time, I knew he wasn't the same guy, right? And like, let's face it, the frustration is because your knee is bothering you. You can't do the things that you normally do. You can't dominate like you normally would have. Yeah. So, you know what? That's why I said, shut it down. But everybody got caught up because he had a 30-point game. He had this, he had that. But at the same time, to me, whenever he would play 4, 5, 6 games in a row, he would have to take another 10 games off, right? Or something like that. Maybe that's exaggeration with the 10, but he took extended time off. So it got to a point where you just said, like, it ain't working. Like, just shut it down. And I knew that they would lose the city, which happened. So just shut it down, come back next year. But, yeah, if he is getting a procedure, do it now. Paul George did it so he could be ready for when the time comes, so just shut it down. I mean, just get a procedure if you need one.
He's got 10 games left to figure that out, because I don't know what they're waiting for, if that's what he thinks he needs or if that's what's going to need to happen for him to go back to what he could be in the dominating way that he needs to be for this team. Why are you waiting at this point? Because the last thing you need is to have another season where you have to come back later. The chemistry's not working with the team. That we're kind of back to square one at that point in time as well. But the 76ers, in terms of right now, currently, they have 10 games left to officially try to get in that top 6, the bottom 6, you could say, of the NBA. And that continues tonight at 7 p.m. It might be a worse basketball game than we saw the other night, but hey, I know a lot of people won't even. It probably will be, right? It probably will be. We'll see if Quentin Grimes ends up playing. I think it will be. Like I said in the last episode, they need to bring back the Big Mac deal here to see who gets to 100 points first, because we might not even scratch the surface of the century mark in this game against the Wizards. But we will wait and see. Once again, that game's at 7 p.m. tonight. And the 76ers in another must-lose situation to try to continue to stay in that top 6 in the NBA reverse standings. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On 76ers. For Keith Pompey, I'm Kayla Santiago saying so long, and we'll see you guys after the game.